What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you that you've never told anyone? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and comment something related to the topic. Let's begin. Story 1. A year or two ago, I stumbled upon a subreddit with quite a few members, but the posts were complete nonsense. Yet, they commented on each other's posts as if they all understood what they were talking about. I lurked there for a while, then got bored and forgot about it. A few weeks later, I was chatting with someone and mentioned the subreddit to them. Out of nowhere, I started getting chat requests from the members of that subreddit. I accepted a few, and they started talking to me, very aggressively, in the same kind of gibberish that filled their sub. I blocked them all and never heard from them again. I have no idea what the hell that was about, but it made my skin crawl. Story 2. When I was 9, I traveled to Mexico for my sister's wedding. I had incredibly blonde hair that fell past my waist. It was absolutely stunning. My brother-in-law, who's a native, went shopping with my sister, my mom, and me. At some point, he went to another section of the store, my mom got distracted, and I think I just wandered off to another aisle. I noticed two men standing fairly close to me, and when I switched aisles, they did too. They were talking to each other, but I had no idea what they were saying, so I just kept looking at the trinkets. Suddenly, my brother-in-law rushed over and quickly escorted me out of the store. He put me in the car, and when my sister came over, I heard her ask what had happened. He told her he'd overheard the two men talking in Spanish about taking me and selling me. For the rest of the trip, every adult around me was strangely protective. I remember being annoyed about it at the time. I didn't understand what that meant until years later. Then it hit me. I was almost trafficked. My brother-in-law is a native Mexican, but he's incredibly pale, with platinum blonde hair and nearly translucent skin, like Jim Gaffigan White. The rest of us were just as fair. I think the men assumed no one in our group spoke Spanish, so they were less guarded than they normally would have been. Thankfully, my brother-in-law overheard them. Story 3. One day, I heard my dad call my name. Weird, but not exactly unusual. He lives nearby and comes over when he needs something, though he usually knocks instead of just yelling my name. I got up and checked outside, but I didn't see his truck. I walked around the house, but couldn't find him anywhere. Then I heard him call my name again, this time with some urgency, like he was getting impatient, but he still wasn't there. From my front yard, I could see his house, and that's when I realized his truck wasn't there either. I grabbed my phone and called him, but he didn't answer, which really freaked me out because he's always quick to pick up. I've called him at midnight and at 5 in the morning. He's never missed a call. Then I heard him say my name again, and without even thinking, I grabbed my keys, got in the van, and headed down the highway. There's a crossroads less than a mile away for possible directions, including back the way I came. I turned down a little back road, and about 3 miles later, I came over a hill and saw his truck lying upside down on the side of the road. He was alive, but dazed. Turns out he had a mild concussion. His phone was still in his pocket. I never told him what I heard. I just let him believe it was a weird coincidence that I decided to go for a drive that day. Story 4. When I was 14, I was walking through my small town, which had no more than 100 people in it. I noticed that a former neighbor who'd moved away had parked near the park. I assumed he was visiting someone and thought nothing of it. I started walking home. It was only about a 3-minute walk from the park to my yard when he pulled up beside me. I was maybe 5 steps from my yard when he tried to convince me to get in his car to see his nephew, who was my friend. When I told him no, he offered to give me a ride all the way to my house, since my yard was fairly big, but honestly, it was only a 2-minute walk at most. I kept saying no, and he started getting angry. Then he reached for something on the passenger seat and tried to grab the door handle. At that exact moment, another neighbor came outside to see what was going on, and the man sped off so fast. A couple of months later, he kidnapped another girl at knife point. I didn't tell anyone because all the girls in town already knew he was a creep. I didn't even process that he had tried to kidnap me until my grandma told me he'd been arrested for kidnapping that girl. Then I felt so guilty for not saying anything sooner. Story 5. I went to New Brunswick for a week to help my mom empty out my grandfather's house after he passed away. I don't live near the ocean, but he lived right across the street from it. So I took advantage and spent hours every day collecting seashells. I'd started a small collection on the front porch. One of the days, we held an estate sale, and more than 100 people came throughout the day. An overly friendly older couple introduced themselves to me, saying they were friends of my grandfather. They mentioned they'd seen the shells on the porch, and the woman said she also collected shells and that I should come to her house to grab some. I laughed awkwardly and walked away. When I came back around to the front of the house, they were talking to my mom's husband about how I should go with them since they lived right down the street. My mom's husband immediately agreed on my behalf, and I felt too awkward to say no at that point, so I just went with them. Turns out, their house, right down the street, was actually about 40 minutes away by car. As soon as we got in, they started asking me all kinds of questions: what grade I was in, what extracurriculars I did, whether I was a party girl or a studious one, stuff like that. Eventually, I had to interrupt them and tell them that I was actually 20 years old and not in school. As soon as I said that, they went from super bubbly and friendly to completely silent for the rest of the ride. When we got to their house, the woman filled a small bag with shells, and they quietly, and very awkwardly, dropped me back off. Super weird vibes. Story 6. Creepiest thing that's ever happened to me, though I've told like half my friends this. Back in my junior year of college, about a week before classes started, my friend, who was a resident advisor, realized he'd forgotten to make a bunch of posters that needed to go up the next morning. It was midnight, and he didn't have a car, but I did. So we headed to Walmart, and it was exactly what you'd imagine a Walmart at midnight in 2012 to be. Random people aimlessly wandering the aisles. The few you did see wearing hoodies like they didn't want anyone to know about their late-night ice cream sandwich cravings. We got to the arts and crafts section and started grabbing random supplies when this random lady poked her head into our aisle and just stared at us. She looked frail, skin and bones with deep wrinkles. Then she said, "Excuse me." And I thought, oh boy. She started asking about some of the products, and I told her, "Sorry, we don't work here, so we don't really know." She just said, "Oh," and kept staring. At that point, we decided whatever we had was good enough. Forget the glitter. We headed to the checkout line. This was before self-checkout, and the same woman ended up right behind us. I was trying hard to avoid eye contact. We checked out and left, joking about how that was our Walmart after dark experience. As we walked through the parking lot, I noticed a large black van with no windows parked oddly, with the engine running. I elbowed my buddy and joked, "Watch out, they're gonna kidnap you," and we laughed about it. Then we hopped into my trusty Honda Accord, RIP. I killed it the following summer, and drove off. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, the black van started following us. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe they were just going the same way. But after hitting 2 different stoplights and making a left turn, they were still behind us. I started to freak out a little, and my buddy noticed. I remembered a trick: keep making left turns to see if someone's actually following you. So I made 3 left turns, and they were still fucking following us. At that point, I was done. I started driving toward the police station on campus. The van must have realized we knew, because it suddenly sped off into the night. I was so relieved. My friend was convinced we were about to get mugged, or worse. We got back to campus and parked near our dorm. There was a single light in the parking lot, about 50 feet from the door. We could see safety. We were almost home. Then, out of the bushes, some random white dude in a hoodie suddenly stepped out like a reverse Homer Simpson meme. He looked like he was tweaking, eyes wide, twitchy energy. He walked up and said, "Hey guys, you got a phone I could use?" I immediately said, "Oh, sorry man, I don't have my phone on me." But right as my friend was about to say something, his fucking phone starts ringing. He just closed his eyes and let out the deepest silent sigh I've ever seen. We both knew what we were thinking. This guy is gonna stab us. My friend started reaching into his pocket to hand over the phone when, boom, red and blue lights flashed behind us. A police car pulled up. I had no idea how to read the situation. Were we saved? Was this about to get worse? The officer stepped out and said, "How's everyone doing tonight?" We awkwardly smiled and said, "Oh, we're just trying to get back to the dorm." The officer zeroed in on Bushman and said, "Hey, I'd like to chat with you real quick. We got a report about a robbery, and you matched the description." The guy hesitated and said, "But I need to make a phone call," lightly waving my friend's phone in the air. The officer calmly replied, "Don't worry, I've got a phone you can use after. Why don't you hand that one back?" I held my breath. My friend froze. The guy just stood there, menacingly. Then finally, he nodded and handed the phone back. We said goodnight, and power walked to the dorm door. Once inside, we slammed it shut, stayed away from the windows, and just lost it. laughing hysterically, probably from adrenaline. I told my buddy I was never driving him anywhere after midnight again. He definitely owed me food after that. So yeah, screw all of that. Story 7. I was 21, walking from one work building to another. It was maybe a 5-minute walk, around 10 p.m. A silver minivan with stuffed animals lined up across the windshield pulled up beside me, rolled down the window, and started creeping along as I walked. The driver asked if I needed a ride. Already tired and annoyed from work, I just said, nope. But he kept asking question after question, and I ignored every single one. Finally, he asked for my name. I stopped walking, and so did he. I just stared at him, literally stood there and stared for a solid 2 minutes. Then I pulled out my phone and took a picture of him with flash, making sure it wasn't discreet. He drove off immediately. A week later, the same thing happened to another female coworker. She told him to fuck off and called the cops. I gave them the picture I'd taken, though I'm not sure if anything ever came of it. Later, we found out there had been a string of sexual assaults happening between those two buildings, and employees were told not to walk that path anymore. I never found out if it was the same guy, but the feeling it gave me was indescribably disturbing. Story 8. I used to live alone, and one day I was walking down a bare hallway. No shelves, no hanging photos, nothing. Just carpet and walls. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement. I looked down and saw a quarter rolling across the carpet, stopping right at my feet. I'm sure there's some perfectly rational explanation for it, even if I have no idea what it was, but in that moment, my heart just stopped cold. On a more humorous note, one night I was out running in the dark, using the Zombies Run app. So I was literally running from zombies. You know that feeling when you suddenly know something evil is behind you, you turn around, there's nothing there, and you laugh at yourself? Well, I turned around, and there was something there. A large, dark shape lunging straight at me. My brain short-circuited. I was sure my soul was about to be dragged to hell. Turns out, it was just the world's friendliest golden retriever who thought we were playing the best game of chase ever. Took my brain a second to catch up, long enough for me to nearly crap myself. Story 9. Look, I've told a couple of people this, but I don't talk about it much because it makes me sound completely insane. So it's around 2 a.m., and my fire alarm suddenly goes off. I didn't realize it had been replaced with one of those voice alarms. So instead of the usual beeping, I hear this soft woman's voice calmly say, "Fire. Creepy, but fine." I get up to check. There's nothing. No smoke, no heat, no smell, not even steam from the shower. Everything's perfectly normal. So I go back to bed. 10 minutes later, fire. Again. I get up, still nothing. Just the alarm's lights flashing. No smoke, no reason for it to be going off. Then, and this is where I start to lose it, I swear I hear, "Didn't you hear me?" I said fire. I freeze. And I'm not kidding. I look around and see what looks like a see-through old woman standing in the corner of my room. "There's a fire," she yells. Absolutely not. I'm convinced I'm dreaming. I hide under the covers, telling myself I'm half asleep and imagining things. But then I hear it again. "There's a fire." At that point, I've had it. I sit up, look right at her and say, "And what am I supposed to do about it?" Call 000 and tell them a ghost told me there's a fire. And then I hear it. Sirens. Fire trucks. A bunch of them racing down the street just a block over. The old woman, this transparent, impossible old woman, says, "Oh good, they're here," and then walks through my wall toward the sound of the sirens. I just stood there like, nope, absolutely not. I popped 2 anxiety meds and went back to bed. I refused to deal with any of that at 2:30 a.m. The next morning, I told my partner what happened. They hadn't heard the alarm, of course. Just for fun, and screw them for this. They looked up if there had been any fires nearby that night. There was. 3 blocks away. An old woman had died while on the phone with the fire department. There was even a photo. It was the same woman I saw. Wrinkle for wrinkle. It was her. Story 10. One summer night, my sister, my cousin, and I decided to drive out into the countryside, about half an hour from home, to steal a road sign that had our family's name on it. We didn't have the right tools, so we figured we'd drive back home to grab them. On the way back, my sister and I both swore we saw a car, stopped at a stop sign a few hundred meters down the road. But when we got to that spot, there was no car. My cousin was in the back seat and said she hadn't been paying attention, but my sister and I both clearly saw it. We couldn't make out much detail about the vehicle, just that it was moving toward the stop sign and then came to a complete stop. There was a stretch of cornfield that briefly blocked our view, and when we passed it, the car was gone. We both remember that the headlights had this weird, almost luminous glow, not like normal lights. It gave us the creeps. When we got home, instead of grabbing the tools right away, we went straight to our room to shake off the weird feeling. A minute later, my car alarm suddenly started blaring. I ran to the window immediately. Nobody was outside. Nothing was touching the car. Then within 60 seconds, the light bulb in our room blew out. That was it. We looked at each other and decided we were done messing with those signs. Story 11. In college, my friends and I got really drunk one night and decided we had to get food from the local 24-hour Mexican place. It was around 3 a.m. and the campus was completely dead. No one in sight. Except for this man dressed head to toe in an all-white suit. He started following us. My friends were too drunk to notice or care, but I definitely did. There was only one girl in our group, so I quietly told her what was going on. About halfway there, I decided I'd had enough. I turned a corner ahead of the group and waited for the guy, ready to tell him to fuck off. Sure enough, he slinked around the corner, sticking to the shadows. I said, "Dude, I've seen you following us. Just get lost." He looked me dead in the eyes, stepped closer, cornered me, and said, "I wasn't following them. I was following you." I froze for a second, completely thrown off. I thought maybe he was hitting on me, so I stammered, "I'm not a..." But right then, my friends finally realized I wasn't with them anymore and yelled my name. The guy looked up for just a second, and I took my chance. I slipped past him, jumped over a railing, and ran like hell. To this day, I have no idea what that guy's deal was. All I know is there's no good reason for a grown man to be lurking outside a college campus at 3 a.m. on a Thursday in a full white suit. Either that, or that one time I went into an abandoned warehouse with 4 of the most muscular Jamaicans I've ever seen to buy my Xbox 360. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.